Welcome, welcome, welcome. Welcome to Inspiring Life with Elizabeth. I'm Elizabeth Browning, and my guest tonight just happens to be one of my most favorite people in the entire world. It's also someone who has known me the longest in my life. It is my sister, but that is not why she's my guest. The reason I've invited her is because she also happens to be a brilliant therapist and has introduced me to a technique and a healing modality that has completely rocked my world. So with no further ado, let me share my brilliant sister with you. Katherine Satterfield brings 30 years of experience as a licensed professional counselor and career coach. She takes a proactive approach to healing, focusing on an individual's strengths and offering techniques to heal the places where clients are blocked from living into their full potential. In addition to traditional talk therapy, Katherine is trained in somatic experiencing, EMDR, and EGALA equine therapy, which involves bringing clients together with horses and resulting in a powerful healing modality. Katherine has developed wellness training programs for community centers, nonprofit organizations, churches, and schools. And she was the Southeast Washington, D.C. coordinator of Strategies to Elevate People, an organization that brings resources to inner city leaders for healing and restoration. She served as an EGALA equine therapist and facilitator at Returning Home, a trauma healing retreat for military veterans. For the last 10 years, Katherine has also worked at the Pentagon for the Department of Navy. And in 2019, she was a speaker at the Pentagon, presenting on the connection between insider threat and PTSD. Katherine is a songwriter, singer, visionary, and my amazing sister, and she's currently developing workshops in resiliency and celebrating the next chapter of your life. Tonight, she is here to share with us some transformational tools for managing stress and overcoming overwhelm. A warm welcome to Katherine Satterfield. Yay!
It is such an honor to be here with you guys, and such an honor to be on my sister's show. And thank you for those wonderful, wonderful accolades. Elizabeth has been my biggest cheerleader, my best friend through a lot of years together. Like, was it 20, right?
At least 20.
and a few. And I just have so much respect for her work and her acting and her training and her incredible love for people. I honestly can say this as her sister. She's got one of the biggest hearts of anyone I've ever known. Oh. So I am beyond honored to be on this show and give you whatever I got.
Thank you. And you know, I mean, it's funny, after this year, the last 13 months, I think there's not anybody that I've spoken to that at some point hasn't experienced some kind of overwhelm and incredible stress. And I think we're at the point now where people are just, you know, not sure. And it's funny because we thought when we were gonna go into lockdown that somehow there'd be less to manage and less to do, but that doesn't seem to be the case. And so I know you have some amazing tools that you're going to give us that I'm super excited about. But before you do, can you talk just a little bit about what overwhelm actually is and what we're actually going to be talking about?
Yeah, I don't know that I have a technical definition of it, but I think we've all felt it. We all know what that experience is of having too much on our plate, too many expectations from other people, too many people wanting something from us, too much happening, too much awful stuff happening in the world around us. But if we try to screen it out, we feel guilty that somehow we're not being sensitive and staying in touch with happening on in the world. So it's too much too fast, or too much too fast for too long. And so I think it's very natural to be focusing on what's happening outside of us, which is also means we're focusing on what's happening outside of our control. And I think one of the biggest things that I've learned in the past few years that's actually changed how I do life is realizing how much of overwhelm is what's happening inside of me. And a lot more that's what's happening inside of me than really the stuff that's coming at me. Now, knowing that doesn't make us feel any better, because overwhelm sucks. I mean, it does, it sucks. It hurts and it's painful. And without the right tools to be able to deal with overwhelm, I think we instinctually default to patterns of protection. And what I mean by that, think about this. When we're overwhelmed or about to become overwhelmed, we eat too much, or we start binge eating. And especially during COVID. I mean, like, who hasn't gained 20 pounds during COVID at least? We get too busy. Patterns of protection, we drink. We blame. Huge pattern of protection. We blame other people because then I don't have to feel bad or feel overwhelmed. So without the right tools, we go into all kinds of ways of trying to protect ourselves that some are slightly more healthy than others.
It's so interesting too, because I think we're so busy beating ourselves up that we don't think of them as patterns of protection. We're like, why am I doing this? Why am I doing that? You were telling me a story that I thought was fascinating about where overwhelm, like, it actually doesn't happen in the moment that something's happening to you, but there can be a history to it. There can be decisions. And you told me this great story about out at the farm, which I had forgotten about. Will you share that?
Oh yeah, no, I have a great memory. And yeah, of course, how much doesn't come at us when we're little, right? So what you guys may not, or you may know about Elizabeth, is that we grew up in Texas, and our mom raised horses and trained horses. So we had the actually super cool gift of being able to spend a lot of our childhood and adolescent years actually on a farm around horses. So Elizabeth and I learned to ride when we were really young. And I have a very specific memory of the two of us riding, and we had ridden bareback to the absolute far end of the pasture. Remember how far that was?
It was big. It was a big pasture.
Yeah, it was a big pasture. It was Texas. Everything in Texas is big. So we're at the far end of the pasture, and I can't remember which one of us decided to do this, but we decided that we were going to race our horses back to the barn. Now, what we hadn't taken into account was the fact that when you're riding a horse toward the barn, they have their own extra incentive to go really, really fast, because what's waiting for them at the barn is the grain that they've been waiting for all day. But that was not in our mind. So we took off. We decided to race. The horses started going faster and faster and faster. And my horse just absolutely took off and ran full speed all the way to the gate, where it slid to a stop. I came flying off, and I landed on my butt. And it was scary. It was terrifying. I mean, the race itself was terrifying. Falling off was terrifying. It hurt. And I was just absolutely mortified, embarrassed that I fell off my horse. So as you remember, in our great wisdom of our youth, we decided that we would never, ever do that again, right? Except that's totally not what happened, because we were young and we were stupid, and we pretty much thought that we were invincible. So I don't know whether it was a week later or a couple weeks later or a month later, we were riding again, bareback, and we were at the far end of the pasture, and that adrenaline started pumping up, and that sense of competition that sisters never have with each other kicked in, and we said, let's do it. So our horses took off mine was going faster and faster, and it hit me halfway to the barn that I don't know how to stop my horse when it's running this fast. And if I keep riding my horse all the way to the gate, I'm going to get thrown off again and land on my butt again. So somehow in the spur of the moment, I made this spontaneous decision that the smarter idea was, while my horse was running full speed, I was getting off. So I pushed off my horse and somehow miraculously landed on my feet, which was crazy and insane. And I think I was kind of proud of it when it happened. And that wasn't the last race we had. Like,
that's because we kept thinking if we did it again, the results would turn out differently, and that somehow it would end up differently. And I can't believe you jumped off. But what I did was, I remember, because I didn't have control over my horse either. We were nuts. So I just held on and I closed my eyes and I just prayed that it would turn out okay if I just held on for dear life. So that's what I did. I held on for dear life, and I didn't fall off, but I had the same experience. I was scared. You were scared. You flew off. I just held on.
But we kept racing. Like, we did this at least 5 or 6 more times. And it's like every single time we would get halfway, I would panic, I would freak off, and I would jump off my horse. And I truly became an expert at jumping off a running horse and falling on my feet. I mean, landing on my feet, which would have been great if I decided to become a trick rider, but that really wasn't the reason. And that also became my number one pattern of protection. So I learned, and I don't know whether it started before that or that was hey, this is a great idea, but I learned to, when anything got too scary or too hard, I was out, and I quit. I just stopped.
What's interesting is I sort of did the opposite, but I would hold on for dear life. And it would be great if these things ended with the event. But like, I know for me, I started holding on for dear life, closing my eyes, not paying attention to signs that maybe I should do something differently, and stayed in projects and in relationships and things far too long, because I kept thinking if I just keep going, somehow it's going to be different. So it's fascinating to me that our patterns of protection. So how did your jumping off play out as you got older? Like,
it totally played into my relationships. It just did. It's like, this was a great skill, I'm going to use it. So I vividly remember a relationship that I was in college, and it was a guy that I had a super, oh my gosh, the biggest crush on this guy. He was just like my heartthrob, and had been friends for a couple of years. And I think you remember, like, do you remember that?
Did his name begin with B?
Yes. His name.
I totally remember.
Started with a B. I mean, biggest crush I think I ever had. And we had become friends for a couple of years, and we finally started dating. And about a year into the relationship, he invited me out to his house. And we were going on this beautiful walk in the woods, like very safe woods in his house. And we took his dogs out, and he was walking ahead with his dogs because they were actually starting to run off, and he was trying to keep up with his dogs. And I was a few steps behind. And my mind kicked in that because he was trying to keep up with his dogs, not thinking because maybe to keep them from running off, and he was not actually walking back beside me, this was not a safe relationship, because he clearly he liked his dogs more than me, and he would not be a man who would be able to cherish and protect me and walk beside me. So same way I jumped off that horse, I made a snap decision that it's like, nope, this is not the relationship with me. And I broke up with him that night.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And he was like, you know, when you kind of go back and you Facebook stalk people that were in, maybe not everybody does that, but you just kind of wonder what they're doing. He was a good guy, and he's still a good guy, and he would have been an amazing catch. But those snap decisions of how are we going to protect ourselves? How are we going to stay? That doesn't necessarily, you know, make its way through the wisdom part. Just takes over. So I think, I mean, I absolutely, as I went through college, finally came to the conclusion that maybe jumping out of things fast because they were hard and scary might not always be the best idea. It's like I remember early on, I dropped out of classes because I was like, this is hard. I'm going to withdraw.
Wow.
But I stopped doing, like, I finally learned that this is stupid. I want to finish college. I want to do this. And so I actually learned to deal with some of the harder stuff. I didn't want to bail in my relationship, so I stayed in. So I kind of navigated that one. I mean, I always had to jump out of things, get scary. It was in my back pocket, but that didn't really become my main default. I started moving over to another one, which became powering through. If something was hard, if something was scary, if I couldn't get out, by God, I was going to shut down my feelings. I wasn't going to get hurt about this. I wasn't going to worry. I wasn't going to be afraid. I was just going to shut it down and power through. So I learned to become an expert at that. And it made a lot of sense. I mean, I got married. I had kids. There are times in marriages that you have to absolutely power through. There are times in jobs that it's like, I'm exhausted. I didn't sleep last night. But of course, you have to power through raising kids through their teen years. I mean, it was like absolutely one of the best things that I possibly could have. And it worked great when I started working at the Pentagon. Well, yeah, because I mean, think about it. Powering through became my great operating system, because for a lot of the military folks that I was working with, they had to learn to shut off their personal feelings and shut off their personal lives and absolutely focus on the mission, sometimes to keep from being killed, you know, and especially when they were in combat. Problem was, I wasn't in combat.
It might have felt like there were times that you were in combat. It might have felt like it. But...
Oh my God, there were absolutely times when I was in combat. But the other challenge with the powering through, and really with any of our patterns of protection, is that they're meant to work for a short period of time. Like I can power through a day when I'm exhausted. I can power through when my kid's sick and I'm sick, but they're not meant to be sustained. And they're especially not meant to become a major operating system that is your default, which actually is kind of what happened to me. Because what happens is when we begin to use something like powering through as our main MO for handling everyday stresses, then the pattern that we developed to keep from becoming overwhelmed becomes overwhelming.
That's so interesting. It's so interesting that the thing that helps us, and it does protect us, but then the flip side of it is that it actually causes more stress. And all of this is an attempt to avoid that feeling of being, that feeling that happens inside, right? Of being overwhelmed.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think what ends up happening is we start working so hard to take care of everybody else, to make sure we get our deadlines, to accomplish all the things that we need to accomplish, that we start ignoring the impact that it actually has inside of us.
So there must have been a turning point, like
so I mean, it starts to build out and we burn up, like it builds up and we burn out. And I absolutely remember the turning point. I was working at the Pentagon, and I had a new supervisor who, the first day I was showing her around, it was my job to show her around and get her badge and get her checked in. And as we were walking around, and I was little cutesy, friendly, hi, this is this, and let me tell you about these people and these patterns. And she said, I just want to let you know, she very proudly informed me that in her last job, she'd had 2 employees that she had given the only 2 bad performance evaluations they'd ever gotten in their lives. She told me that she had her supervisees that called in sick from work when they had meetings with her. And she told me she was a retired Navy nurse. Hope she's not watching this, but she was a retired Navy nurse. And she said that when we were recruiting our young and when we were working with our junior nurses, her motto, her favorite motto with her colleagues was, we eat our young. So this was day 1, and I could feel my nervous system just starting to go, whoa, and the overwhelm start to kick in. I was her only supervisee.
Oh,
And
lucky
so
you.
it was bad. It was bad, and it got worse. And I think the pinnacle happened one day when I was sitting at my desk, and I cannot remember why she got mad at me, but it wasn't a big thing. It really wasn't. But I was sitting there, she was hovering over my desk, screaming at me. I could feel the blood in my face. And it's like, I don't remember ever being so mad, not even when you and I were fighting. I don't ever remember feeling the blood in my face, but I could feel the blood in my face. And I had to be diplomatic. I could not respond. I had to keep my cool together and powering through, worked through that conversation. And then it just didn't anymore. I was like the little engine that just frickin' couldn't anymore. And my family and my friends started reporting that it's like, you were just getting mean and calloused, and I offended people. And my adult daughters just said, Mom, your language is just getting so foul. And I was getting angry, and I was exhausted at the end of the day. And thank God, by the grace of God, that year, I had also started a training program and a thing called somatic experiencing, which works with the body, and it works with how overwhelm and trauma actually shows up in our body, and gives us tools for how to work that through in our nervous systems.
And I have to say, you're doing that had a ripple effect, because as you were finding a whole new way to cope with what was happening energetically in your system, you gave me just a few exercises. And I've done a lot of work on myself. I've done workshops, I've done therapy, I'm a junkie for self-development. Nothing impacted me the way that these exercises did in terms of awakening to a whole other way in. So I'm super excited to be able to share this with my friends and with the people tuning in, because nobody teaches us this growing up. Nobody even is aware of this growing up. So tell us about somatic experiencing.
Yeah, I mean, I will tell you this too. Like, I've been a therapist for 40 years, and I've done a lot of talk therapy. And what this work does is it gets you connected with, literally neurologically, it's not woo-woo. It literally gets you connected with tools that help you shift your neurology. And I think a lot of people have read the neuroplasticity of our life is ridiculous, and our ability to bounce back and reprogram and change how things happen. And that, especially those 2 years in that job, it saved my nervous system, and it saved my sanity. So I want to give you guys some tips on somatic experiencing. I would love to be able to talk to you more about neurology and how overwhelm works and shows up in our body. But if you can Google, there's so much. If you want to Google somatic experiencing or neurology and the body and trauma, there's just so much amazing stuff on the really technical stuff on how it works. But in a nutshell, when you think about just common phrases of, wow, they were really a pain in the neck, or man, that was really a kick in the gut, or man, when that breakup is like a brick in my chest. And so I think when you just even think of the way that we talk, it's like that's just the tip of the iceberg of the things that happen in our body when we just have powering through or jumping off, and we're not tuning into how do I deal with this, and the stuff that got stuck here, how do I regulate it and get it out of me. So let me just start with a couple of tips. One of the tips is I've called come to your senses, just because hopefully it's something that you can remember. And when come to your senses, when we're on overwhelm, we're typically out there. You know, we're looking at this could happen. I've got this and I've got this deadline, and oh my God, what am I going to do? And it all starts piling up. And those of us with ADD, it's like put that on crack, because our brains are just going, blah, 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 yeah, it goes everywhere. Coming to our senses basically means let's go back to what you can see, what you can feel, what you can taste, and take some time to be the thing when you hear be in the moment. That's actually neurologically super smart, because when we focus on like everything's spinning out and it's like, you know what, I'm going to look at this lamp right now and I'm just going to notice the texture of the lamp, and I'm going to listen to the air conditioning coming through the vent rather than thinking about, oh my God, am I going to remember all this on my talk? And just coming into the here and now. And the way that we do that is literally to become aware of our senses. Like, how many times have you been sitting thinking about something and planning something and pissed off at somebody out on the deck, and then you stop and there are actually birds singing that you didn't even listen to? And so coming to your senses is another tip, is just trying to remember, just trying to tune in. It's like, okay, what do I see? What do I taste? What do I feel? Another one is which is super hard for us in the Northeast, super hard, is to slow down, just to really slow down. One of my favorite phrases that I use with clients is pause, pause. And one of the best places to pause is when we come to our senses and there's actually the sound of a bird, and we take like a 1-minute vacation to allow that to soak into our body. So I finally did learn to stop my horse when it was running. And one of the ways that I think we did is we finally, when we did have races, we ran away from the barn, which had been totally stupid, but we still wanted to race because it was fun to go fast, but we didn't go toward the barn. But I also learned to put on the brakes. Like when I was running, it's like, before stop the horse before it gets to the gate. So when our mind is starting to spin out, start putting on the brakes, stop, and I know it seems impossible sometimes, but it's like, go to one thing, take a pause and pick one of the little items, or pick something that you see that's pleasurable or pleasant. So slow down, pause. Take some moments to step out of what's overwhelming. The other one is to, while you're coming to your senses, while you're noticing, but I can't stop my thoughts, get curious. Because one of the things that keeps us spinning out and overwhelmed is not only are we overwhelmed, but sometimes we get pissed at ourselves for being overwhelmed. And why didn't I do this? And I should have planned better. And then we start getting super critical. And it's like, you know, change your critical to curious. And you were saying, what were you saying earlier? You were saying something, Elizabeth.
That I've heard that if you can remember to stop in the middle of something and say, what's the opportunity for me in this? Because when we're spinning out or when we're upset, it never occurs to us that there's like a really rich opportunity if we stop long enough to actually breathe into it. And Lois has this great saying. She says, from criticism to curiosity. That's one of her, and she does a talk about the 5 C's. And so it's, you know, it's really powerful to remember to be curious and to say, wait, maybe there's an opportunity in this. So
curiosity is absolutely powerful. And as you do more work, which we're going to talk about in a minute, coming a little bit more into your body, as safe as that is, curiosity is huge. Curiosity about it's like, you know, I'm going to become like going a little exploration and become a scientist about like when I really get up. So let's move on to some of the exercises. The first exercise, which really ties into the tips, is resourcing. And when I talk about resourcing, I'm really, really specific about it's inviting the mind and the body to slow down and really take in the good stuff. It's like not in the last, I'm not going to say how many years, but not in a long time is our nature to take in the good stuff, because there's been a lot of stuff happening in our world, a lot of news flicks, and it is absolutely the resourcing, taking in and inviting the mind and body to slow down and take in some of the good things or the safe things is actually the opposite of watching the news. Because I don't care what side you're on, it's activating. It's activating. And I think one of the things, we have a natural brain bias toward negativity. So if there's all kinds of stuff going on in the world, 80% chance that we will go to the threat versus going to what brings safety, because that's our instincts. It's our survival instincts. And especially if there's been trauma or some kind of super painful stuff in our childhood, it's even more heightened that our little sentry that wants to find out what's wrong. Okay, what's it is on overload. So resourcing takes a lot of work. And what it is it's like really retraining the brain to focus on what's good and right. So let's just for a minute, you can close your eyes, you can open your eyes, you can do whatever you want to do. But actually start with just taking your eyes off the screen and take some time to just slowly orient around the room. Just start looking around the room and watch for, if you're critical of something or a mess or whatever, just stop it, because that's not what you're looking for. Because one of the things that gets truncated with trauma or overwhelm is our orienting response. So literally the act of looking around the room and seeing what your eyes are drawn to, and particularly seeing something that actually brings your eyes pleasure. It can be a color. I'm looking at the artificial plant here, and there's like this really beautiful bright green. And it's just, so notice what around it. Can be a color, it can be a texture. And here's where you bring in some curiosity. But as you're noticing and looking at what looks pleasant or what just brings pleasure, notice how that shows up in your body. Notice what happens to your body. Another thing with resourcing is to just bring up some memories and some tools of, think about petting your cat or petting your dog. And that sensation of just petting the animal. It can be bringing to your mind the sound of going to the playground and hearing children singing. If you're a walker through the park or the woods, just bringing up in your mind something that was nice, something. And if you can bring up something from a memory that you experienced, it's more powerful because it reminds your body of a resource that's still there. And if there are people, if they're grandmas, if they're, and if you can't find something like characters on movies that bring you joy or that bring you laughter or that just have a sense of safety. And just take some time to breathe that in. And the really important thing is to give it a moment to allow your nervous system to register it. Because I can tell you, when we power through or we have our patterns of protection of eating or sleeping or watching or getting lost in somebody else's story or fixing their problems, it's like we miss the potential of bringing in new resources. And when we do, it changes our neurology. It absolutely changes our neurology. And the more resources, the more you practice this, the more you say, pause, hear my voice saying, pause, take that in. Let your nervous system take that in. Any kind of happy moments, sweet moments, pause and take some time to resource yourself.
It's like a skill, isn't it, that you have to develop, like a muscle.
It's like a muscle. Yeah, it's like a muscle. It's like a muscle that you have to develop, that especially when everything's been, it atrophies, but it's not gone. It's not gone.
I love that too, because I can be working, worried about this, worried about that. And if I think what you said is, when you really allow yourself to really take a vacation for a minute and bring something in. So I look around the room and I see my mom's horse statue that I love. And there's this whole sense of, like just loveliness in the middle of, and I think it's so much simpler than we give ourselves credit for. So yeah. I have a question, because I know this was one of my questions. That's a great idea when you're already sort of kind of calm and you're able to like say, but what happens when you're really in the middle of like crazy upset and your system is spinning out and you're like, you remember your resources, but you don't know how to use your resources? Is there a way to work this even while your boss is standing over you screaming in your face?
Yeah. There's another tool that Peter Levine, the guy that started somatic experiencing, which is where I learned a lot of this, coined a term called pendulation. Pendulation. And the idea of pendulation is that they also call it looping, but it's moving back and forth between where we're constricted or where we're contracted and where we're expanded. And so the muscles in our bodies can only do two things. They can contract and they can expand. And depending upon what we pay attention to, where we bring our attention, we can create those sensations of contracting or expanding. And it's like nature. It's like the ocean, the tides of the ocean kind of coming in and coming out, or the birds of a wing, they tense their muscles and then they go down and then they tense and then they can kind of float through the air. And so it so goes with nature. And so starting again with let's just go back to the place of Noticing anything pleasant around us, and just finding something that's nice or safe or pleasant, and just allowing that to register in your nervous system. And then to bring to your mind a upset, not a trauma, not like a big T trauma, but somebody who really pissed you off, or that you didn't feel heard, or you felt so rejected, or you put so much into this and you didn't get the credits that you wanted. And see if you can bring to mind just a or a and when you do, notice how that shows up in your body. Because usually where it shows up is in the face, the jaw tightens if we're mad, the throat tightens, our chest starts to tighten, and it can show up in our chest, you know, that brick in the chest. It's like, oh, my heart's broken. But the truth is the muscles around the heart are just going, because I'm going to protect you. You know, the gut tightens. So notice when you think about it, I'm going to be quiet for a minute, but so I want to give you a chance to bring up your thing, whatever happened. And again, don't make it too big because we don't want you to go into trauma reaction, but something that's irritating or upsetting enough, and notice where it shows up in your upper body, because it usually does show up in the upper body. And now I want you to go back to something pleasant, but this time I want you to notice, see if you can bring the attention down to where you're seated in the chair and your feet are on the floor. I don't know whether you have socks on or shoes. I want you to feel in the bottom of your foot where your foot's connected to the ground, or where you can feel the sock on your foot or the shoe on your foot. Like really notice the bottom of your foot. And notice the seat under you and how it's supporting you. If you're leaning back, notice how it's supporting you behind. Or if you're in your bed, I don't know where you are. But just notice the support and really bring your attention down to the support of your legs. Notice the strength of your quads. And then for a moment, I want you to come back up to that place where the upset showed up. And if this isn't working for you, it's totally okay, because some people, I will tell you, it takes work even getting inside the body or noticing sensations in the body. So it is totally okay. And if that's hard for you, then just notice the sensation of looking at something in the room that's pleasant and thinking about something that's unpleasant. And as much as you can, notice how it feels a little different, even if it's nuanced inside of you. So just take some time. And now just take a few moments on your own to go back and forth, to pendulate back and forth between, if you can keep the story out that pissed you off or rejected for the moment, if you can take the story and bookmark it, put it on the shelf, it's there, I promise it will be there. And just notice how the sensations of the story are showing up in your body. And now go back to your seat and your legs and your feet on the floor. And or any other part of the body where you just feel that might feel neutral, that feels chill. Like if you, I don't know if you have a lot of pain, go to the part where there's least pain, you know, whether it's the top of your hand, the top of your head, It can be the top of your foot, bottom. Just find a place that's just more, this is okay. This is pretty chill. And really allow your nervous system to take that in. And what happens when you're able to go back and forth between the contraction and the expansion and the contraction and the expansion, what it does is it takes the polarities of the contraction, which is run, probably a lot of our life, but when we begin to introduce the expansion, it begins to integrate the nervous system.
I think that's one of the things that I found the most fascinating the first time I did this, because I had never, I remember I was really upset and I was fighting with somebody in my head and I was coming up with my argument, and all of a sudden it was like, wait, let me just go to my body, which I'd never done. And just doing the pendulating, the way I thought about the story actually changed. And the answers that I came up with. And it's almost like we're creating like an energetic loop between that which is not triggered and that which is. And that what I'm fascinated, because you've worked with veterans that have come back with serious PTSD. Like this works on.
Oh, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. Because a lot of the modalities with them, it's like, let's relive the trauma. Let's go right to the, and that's just so cruel. That's just so cruel, and this works. It absolutely works. And it's so much more gentle. And it's like when the day that supervisor was hovering over my desk, screaming at me, I had already started somatic experiencing. So it was the coolest thing, and not being yelled at, but I remember feeling the blood in my face and the tightness of my chest. And I was watching her, but then I went, feel my butt. Let me feel my butt in the seat. And I put my energy there. I felt my foot on the floor. I felt my chest. I felt the tightness. I felt my butt. And it still wasn't pleasant. It still sucked, but it made it so much better. And so just the pendulating, and it's not, oh, I'm going to feel my butt so that I don't feel stressed anymore. No, it's about going back and forth. It's not about not feeling stress. It's about getting curious about the stress, getting curious about, wow, notice the blood in my face. That's kind of cool. I've never felt that before. Wow, this is really tense. And as again, keeping the story out as much as possible, it will be there, I promise. And just working with the nervous system, what it does is it raises our capacity. It increases our capacity. So because normal really is this, it's not, it's like we get upset, we get stressed, we get annoyed. And then the trick is learning to bring ourselves back down. And that's what the pendulation is you're teaching your body how to be up and then how to go down. And it's super effective. And
so we're just about out of time. And I there was one last thing you were going to give us. And I wish that, I know, let's do a workshop. Let's do a half-day workshop, and where we can really go in.
We'll talk about it.
But there was one other exercise that I was excited about you sharing that I've actually been using this week since you first told me about it.
Yeah. So another one, when the overwhelm is just there in your face, and it's just like, okay, the pendulating isn't working. Nothing's working. A really helpful thing is if you take one hand and put it under your armpit and the other and put it on your shoulder, not above or not in your, but like capping your shoulder, basically containing your shoulder, and figure out which works better. Because I don't know if you're left-handed, right-handed, kind of feel what works most natural for you.
And when you say works, what are we looking for? Like the most grounded?
Like, if I do this and like this doesn't, I don't know, this doesn't feel right. Like this just feels better. It just feels more natural. So one hand under the armpit. Yeah, one hand under the armpit, the other on the shoulder, And it's like the one hand is crossing over the heart, it's touching the heart, it's connecting, it's being present with the heart. And the other is on your shoulder, just creating containment. So a lot of what this is about is, oh my God, with everything happening all around me, I can bring to myself a sense of safety and presence. Even if we don't feel understood, or it's like in this moment, it's literally like you saying to yourself, I'm here. I'm here. And it creates a type of containment. So just, and for some people, again, if our nervous system is used to being racked out, give it time. Give it more time. Just to be able to settle. So just for a moment, I'm going to shut up, which is so hard for me to do. And just feel your arm in your shoulder, put your arm and suspend any judgment, a little chattering. I don't know if this is word, just, put it on the shelf and just keep your arms there and then just notice. See if you can go inside and just notice. Kind of like giving yourself a hug. But it actually does so much more inside the nervous system. And it's just a way to contain stuff that's just too much.
So great.
A resilient nervous system, kind of with the pendulation and the containment, really is one that can go back and forth between stress, even overwhelm sometimes, and calm, or even an activated, engaged nervous system and a calm, peaceful nervous system without getting stuck. And some of these tools are beautiful for like when we're stuck, just go, okay, what does stuck feel like? Oh, it feels like my head. And and get curious about stuck, and then go down to where it's safe and where it's peaceful. So yeah, those are the exercises.
So Katherine, I am so grateful. And I will say this did not come quickly to me and I had to work on it. But the more I work on it, the more I watch all the other work I've done on myself falling into place in a different way. So I know that you have a PDF with a list of tips and tools. So if anyone would like to get a copy of that PDF, you can email Katherine at Katherine Satterfield, Katie Sat, KATTIE SATTLPC at gmail.com. And that will put you on the mailing list. And also then she can let you know when the upcoming workshops are going to be. And Katherine, obviously I adore you. I'm incredibly grateful for you. And as we wrap up tonight, any last word of advice or any tips you want to give us as we go off to begin to actually contain and hold and care for our own nervous system?
Yeah, I think practice pause, especially in this world, in this culture. Practice pause, come to your senses. Like, please pause and train. We have to train ourselves to take in the good. And even like, I think a lot of people have gratitude journals. Don't just start with I'm grateful for. Pause and allow your nervous system to metabolize what you're grateful for. That extra little minute vacation of allowing your nervous system to metabolize it is what is what starts the changes. And the other thing that I absolutely challenge you to do is, if you can take a break from the news, if you haven't already done it, well, if a week, that would be awesome, even a day or two. And instead of watching the news and activating our nervous system, play with some of this stuff. Play with going out for a walk in the woods, play with, or even looking around your house, is what makes me feel safe, and come up with a list, a list of resources, because those become the opposite for you of that, those become the places. So yeah, that's it.
So thank you so much, my beloved sister. Next time we'll have to have her sing some of her amazing songs and play the music. But thank you, because this is really a gift. And I think it's such a good time for all of us to begin to recover our own sense of well-being and calm and the antidote for overwhelm. So with that, thank you, everyone. And I love you all. And I hope you have a blessed evening, and we will see you again soon. Good night, everybody.